The USS Valiant drifted through the dark void of space near the Kepler 442 system, its hull reflecting the distant light of foreign stars. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the endless black through the main view screen while his crew ran their routine patrol duties. The heavy cruiser had been out here for 3 weeks now, checking shipping lanes and scanning for pirates or smugglers, who might be using the outer rim as a hiding place. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her tactical station, her fingers dancing across the control panel as she monitored the ship's defensive systems. Everything seemed normal until a soft chime echoed through the bridge, followed by a series of rapidly blinking lights on her console. She frowned and ran the scan again, certain that her instruments were malfunctioning. "Captain, I'm picking up some very strange readings on long-range sensors," Amy said, her voice carrying just a hint of uncertainty. 12 massive contacts approaching our position from deep space, bearing 27 Mark IV. Jake turned his chair toward her station and raised an eyebrow. "How massive are we talking about, Lieutenant?" Amy checked her readings twice before responding. "Sir, each contact appears to be roughly 10 times the size of our ship. They're moving in perfect formation at approximately half-light speed and should reach our position in about 40 minutes. Ensign Tony Blake, the ship's communications specialist, swiveled around from his station near the back of the bridge. His young face showed concern as he studied his own instruments. "Captain, I'm not detecting any standard identification signals or communication attempts from those contacts. They're maintaining complete radio silence." Jake felt his stomach tighten slightly. In all his years of service, he had never encountered anything like this. Unknown ships of that size could only mean one thing, though he hesitated to voice his thoughts aloud. "Tony, send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we have 12 unknown vessels of significant size approaching our position. Request immediate backup and further instructions." Meanwhile, aboard the Lead alien vessel, Admiral Kethver of the Zephyrian Confederation stood before a massive holographic display showing the approaching human ships. His tall, slender form was typical of his species, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the tactical situation. Behind him, several junior officers monitored various control stations, their movements precise and calculated. "Subcommander Veilthus, what is your analysis of these primitive vessels?" Kethver asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for over 2 decades. Veilthus, a younger Zephyrian with slightly darker skin tones, studied the readings on his console before responding. "Admiral, our long-range sensors indicate that the human ships are significantly smaller than our vessels. Their technology appears to be based on crude fusion reactions and basic metal alloys. I estimate their military capability to be minimal." At best, Kethver nodded slowly, though something about the situation troubled him. The Zephyrian Confederation had been observing human civilization from a distance for several years, noting their rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion into space. However, their intelligence suggested that human military technology was still centuries behind Zephyrian capabilities. Back aboard the USS Valiant, Chief Science Officer Lisa Park emerged from the ship's main laboratory carrying a datapad filled with sensor readings and analysis reports. She approached Captain Morrison with quick, purposeful steps, her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that swayed as she walked. "Captain, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from those approaching vessels," Lisa said, her voice filled with scientific curiosity mixed with concern. "Their power output is enormous, but it seems to be concentrated almost entirely in defensive systems. These ships appear to be built more like mobile fortresses than attack vessels." Jake studied the data on her pad, though much of the technical information was beyond his understanding. "What does that mean for us, Doctor?" Lisa adjusted her glasses and pointed to several graphs on the display. "Well, sir, it suggests that while they have massive defensive capabilities, their offensive weapons might not be proportionally powerful. However, I should mention that their shielding technology appears to be far more advanced than anything we currently possess. At that moment, Commander Ryan Hayes contacted the Valiant from the USS Thunder, one of two other human ships that had been patrolling nearby systems. His face appeared on the main view screen, showing the weathered features of a veteran officer who had seen his share of combat. "Jake, we're detecting those same massive contacts on our sensors," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the unusual situation. "The USS Lightning is also picking them up. What are your orders?" Jake considered their options carefully. 3 human ships against 12 alien vessels of unknown capability was not exactly favorable odds, but they had a duty to protect human space and investigate potential threats. "Ryan, bring your ships to our position, but maintain a defensive formation. We don't know what their intentions are, so let's not give them any reason to consider us hostile." As the human ships began moving into position, alien sensors aboard the Zephyrian fleet detected the tactical maneuver. Sub-Commander Valthus immediately reported the development to Admiral Kethfer, who studied the human formation with growing interest. "Admiral, the human vessels are assuming what appears to be a defensive posture," Valthus reported. "However, our sensors are detecting unusual energy fluctuations from their power systems. The readings don't match our previous intelligence about human technology." Kethfer moved closer to the tactical display, his large eyes focusing on the energy signatures emanating from the human ships. Something about those readings seemed wrong, though he couldn't quite identify what was bothering him. "Continue monitoring their energy output. I want to know immediately if there are any changes in their power levels or weapon status." Back on the Valiant, engineer Sam Collins was working frantically in the engine room to boost their communication systems. The approaching alien fleet was still maintaining complete radio silence, and Jake had ordered him to try every possible frequency and communication protocol in an attempt to establish contact. "Captain, I'm pushing our communication array to maximum power," Sam reported through the ship's intercom system. "If there's anyone out there willing to talk, they should be able to hear us now." Unfortunately, what Sam didn't realize was that the sudden spike in electromagnetic emissions from the Valiant's communication system triggered proximity alarms throughout the alien fleet. The Zephyrian vessels, designed to detect and counter electronic warfare attacks, interpreted the boosted signal as a possible hostile action. Admiral Kethfer watched as warning lights began flashing across multiple control stations. "Sub-Commander, what is the nature of those electromagnetic pulses coming from the human vessels?" Valthus checked his instruments twice before responding, his voice showing the first signs of uncertainty. "Admiral, the energy patterns don't match any known communication protocols in our database. The humans appear to be using some form of directed electromagnetic manipulation that our sensors cannot properly classify." As both fleets continued their approach toward each other, the stage was set for a confrontation based entirely on misunderstanding and technological confusion. Neither side realized that their opponent was operating under completely different assumptions about the nature of the encounter, and both were beginning to view the other as a potential threat to be handled with extreme caution. The distance between the two fleets continued to shrink as both sides struggled to understand what they were facing. Admiral Kethfer stood rigid at his command station, watching the tactical display with growing concern as his communication officers attempted to establish contact with the human vessels using standard galactic frequencies. "Admiral, we are broadcasting on all recognized first contact channels, but the human vessels are not responding in any known format," reported Communications Officer Zolthek, her voice carrying the frustration of someone trained to handle diplomatic encounters. "Their language patterns are completely unlike anything in our database." Kethfer nodded grimly, though his attention was focused more on the energy readings coming from the human ships than on communication attempts. The small vessels were generating power signatures that defied his understanding of physics, and their compact fusion reactors seemed to be running at efficiency levels that should have been impossible for such primitive technology aboard the USS Valiant. Engineer Sam Collins was pushing every system to its limits in an attempt to boost their communication capabilities. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he rerouted power from non-essential systems. trying to give their transmitters enough strength to punch through whatever interference was preventing contact with the alien fleet. "Captain, I'm channeling everything. We've got into the communication array," Sam reported through the intercom, his voice strained with effort. "But I'm getting some strange feedback patterns that suggest their technology operates on completely different principles than ours." The sudden electromagnetic surge from the Valiant's boosted communication system sent panic through the alien fleet as their sophisticated sensors interpreted the energy spike as something far more sinister than a simple attempt at contact. Warning. Alarms began sounding throughout the Zephyrian vessels as their automated defense systems registered what they classified as an electronic warfare attack. Subcommander Valethus rushed to his admiral's side, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. "Admiral, the human vessels have just initiated what appears to be a coordinated electromagnetic assault on our sensor networks. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our tactical database." Admiral Kethver felt his confidence wavering for the first time in decades of military service. These human ships, which had initially appeared to be primitive and harmless, were demonstrating capabilities that challenged everything the Zephyrian Confederation knew about this species. "Continue monitoring their activities and prepare all defensive systems for full activation." Dr. Helen Carter, the fleet's xenobiologist aboard the USS Horizon, was working desperately to establish some form of peaceful communication with the approaching alien vessels. Her background in interspecies psychology had taught her that first contact situations were extremely delicate, and any misunderstanding could lead to disaster for both civilizations. "Captain Turner, I recommend we try a mathematical approach," Helen said to the Horizon's commanding officer, Captain Nick Turner. "Mathematical concepts should be universal, and we might be able to establish basic communication using prime numbers or geometric patterns." Nick nodded and turned to his communications officer. "Lieutenant, begin broadcasting a sequence of prime numbers on all frequencies. Maybe that will show them we're trying to communicate peacefully." However, when the USS Thunder and USS Lightning moved into formation to better protect the science vessel Horizon, the aliens interpreted this tactical repositioning as preparation for an attack. The human ship's movements, which were intended to shield their most vulnerable vessel, appeared to alien sensors as an aggressive maneuver designed to maximize their offensive capabilities. "Admiral, the human vessels are assuming an attack formation," Valethus reported, his voice now carrying genuine alarm. "They have positioned their largest vessel in a protected position, while moving their more heavily armed ships into forward positions." The situation grew even more complex when alien long-range sensors detected additional energy signatures jumping into the system. What the Zephyrians didn't realize was that the three approaching vessels were actually supply ships from the human fleet, carrying food, fuel, and replacement parts rather than weapons or soldiers. The USS Meridian, USS Endeavour, appeared on alien screens as additional military contacts, their jump signatures creating massive energy readings as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. To the aliens who had never encountered human jump drive technology, these energy signatures suggested some form of advanced space-folding capability far beyond their own understanding. "3 additional human vessels have just appeared in the system," announced Tactical Officer Yervin, his voice tight with stress. "Admiral, their jump technology is completely unknown to us. The energy requirements for such instantaneous travel should be impossible for vessels of their apparent size." Admiral Kethver stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. Not only were the original human ships demonstrating impossible energy efficiency, but now they had been reinforced by additional vessels using technology that the Zephyrian Confederation had only theorized about in their most advanced research facilities. Dr. Jake Morrison, meanwhile, was dealing with his own confusion as he tried to understand why the alien fleet was maintaining such an aggressive posture. The massive alien ships had arranged themselves in what appeared to be a battle formation, with their heaviest vessels taking point positions and their smaller escorts spreading out to cover a wide area of space. "Amy, what's the status of their weapon systems?" Jake asked his tactical officer, though he suspected the answer would not be reassuring. "Lieutenant, Amy Rodriguez studied her sensor readings carefully before responding. Captain, their energy signatures suggest they have weapons capabilities far beyond anything in the human arsenal. However, I'm detecting some unusual patterns in their power distribution that I don't understand. What Amy was actually seeing was the alien fleet's automated defense systems cycling through various protective protocols as they tried to analyze the strange energy patterns coming from human ships. The Zephyrian vessels, designed to counter known threats, were struggling to classify human technology and were defaulting to maximum defensive settings. Engineer Pete Walsh, working in the Valiant's main engineering section, made a discovery that would prove crucial to the developing situation. While analyzing the electromagnetic interference patterns affecting their communications, he noticed that human plasma weapon systems were creating cascade effects in local space that seemed to disrupt whatever scanning methods the aliens were using. Captain, I think I know why we're having communication problems, Pete reported. Our plasma conduits are generating interference patterns that might be scrambling their sensors. If I adjust the frequency harmonics, we might be able to clear up the static. However, when Pete made his adjustments, the change in plasma frequency created even more confusion aboard the alien ships. Their sensors, calibrated to detect known energy signatures, registered the frequency shift as evidence that human ships were using some form of adaptive technology that could modify its operational parameters in real-time. Sub-Commander Valethus watched his instrument readings with growing horror as the human energy signatures seemed to shift and change before his eyes. Admiral, the human vessels appear to have some form of adaptive technology that can alter their energy patterns at will. This suggests a level of technological sophistication that far exceeds our initial assessment. The aliens were now convinced that they were facing a species with technology so advanced that it appeared primitive only because they didn't understand its underlying principles. The compact fusion reactors, adaptive communication systems, and unknown jump drive technology painted a picture of human capabilities that terrified even these experienced military officers. As both fleets continued their approach, the stage was set for a confrontation that neither side wanted but both were beginning to see as inevitable. The humans, trying desperately to establish peaceful contact, had no idea that their every action was being interpreted as evidence of hostile intent and superior technology by an alien civilization that was rapidly losing confidence in their own military superiority. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Johnson stood in the Marine section of the USS Valiant, watching the tactical displays that showed both fleets moving closer to what looked like an inevitable confrontation. As the commanding officer of the ship's Marine contingent, Brad had seen plenty of combat situations, but nothing had prepared him for this strange standoff with alien vessels that seemed to be acting in ways that made no tactical sense. Something's not right about their movement patterns, Brad muttered to himself as he studied the alien formation. The massive ships were maintaining perfect spacing and moving in completely predictable trajectories, as if they were following some kind of computer program rather than adapting to the changing tactical situation. Intelligence Officer Karen White was working at a nearby console, running analysis programs on the alien fleet's behavior patterns. Her background in military intelligence had taught her to look for weaknesses in enemy formations, and what she was seeing from these aliens troubled her more than any aggressive maneuver would have. Colonel Johnson, I think you should see this, Karen said, her voice carrying a note of excitement mixed with concern. I've been tracking the alien ship movements for the past 30 minutes, and they're following completely predictable algorithmic patterns. It's like they're not adapting to our movements at all. Brad moved to her station and studied the projected flight paths she had calculated. The alien vessels were indeed following mathematical curves that could be predicted several minutes in advance, with no variation or creative tactical thinking evident in their formation changes. Meanwhile, aboard the lead Zephyrian vessel, Sub-Commander Valethus was reporting another disturbing development to Admiral Kethfer. Their advanced communication interception systems, designed to decode any known language in the galaxy, were completely failing to make sense of human transmissions. Admiral, our language processing computers are unable to decode the human communication. Patterns, Velthus reported, his voice showing the strain of trying to understand an impossible situation. The encryption methods they are using appear to be based on quantum principles that our systems cannot break. Admiral Keffer felt his confidence continuing to erode as each new report painted a picture of human technology that defied explanation. In reality, the humans were using standard military encryption protocols that were considered basic by their own standards. But the alien computers were so sophisticated that they couldn't recognize such simple encoding methods. Captain Jake Morrison made a decision that would change the entire dynamic of the encounter. Instead of waiting for reinforcements or trying to maintain a defensive posture, he decided to demonstrate human tactical flexibility in hopes of showing the aliens that his ships were capable of more than they might expect. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake announced over the fleet communication channel. "We're going to show these aliens what human tactics look like. Begin evasive pattern Delta 7, but keep it unpredictable. I want every ship captain to use their own judgment and avoid following any set algorithms." The human ships immediately began executing movement patterns that seemed to have no logic or mathematical basis. The USS Thunder started a spiraling climb that suddenly reversed into a diving turn, while the USS Lightning began a series of figure-8 maneuvers that changed direction seemingly at random aboard the alien fleet. Chaos erupted as their tactical computers tried desperately to predict human movements and failed completely. The Zephyrian vessels, which had relied on computational analysis for centuries, found themselves facing an opponent whose actions couldn't be calculated or predicted by any known mathematical model. "Admiral, our tactical systems are unable to predict human ship movements," reported Tactical Officer Yervin, his voice filled with panic. "Their flight patterns appear to be completely random, yet they maintain perfect formation integrity. This suggests a level of coordination that our computers cannot analyze." Engineer Pete Walsh, working in the Valiant's engineering section, made another crucial discovery while trying to optimize their plasma weapon systems. The interference patterns created by human weapons were having unexpected effects on alien sensor arrays, causing their long-range scanning systems to malfunction in ways that created false readings. "Captain, I think our plasma conduits are causing some kind of cascade effect in their sensor networks," Pete reported through the intercom. "Every time we charge our weapons, their scanning beams seem to get scrambled." Weapons Officer Linda Gray, stationed at the tactical console, saw an opportunity to test this theory. "Captain Morrison, request permission to fire a warning shot into empty space. If Engineer Walsh is correct, it might give us some tactical advantage." Jake considered the request carefully. Firing weapons, even into empty space, could be interpreted as a hostile act. But if it could demonstrate human capabilities without actually threatening anyone, it might be worth the risk. "Permission granted, Lieutenant. Fire one plasma burst at bearing 0 Mark 0, maximum range." The plasma discharge from the Valiant's main weapon created a brilliant flash of energy that lit up the surrounding space. However, the real effect was invisible to human sensors but devastating to alien detection systems. The plasma burst created an electromagnetic cascade that temporarily blinded several Zephyrian vessels and sent false readings throughout their entire sensor network. "Admiral, the human weapon discharge has created some form of sensor disruption field," Sub-Commander Velthus reported, his voice now carrying genuine fear. "Our long-range sensors are showing impossible energy readings and 3 of our ships have temporarily lost scanning capability." Admiral Kethver stared at the tactical display as his ships sensor readings showed energy patterns that shouldn't have been possible from such a small weapon discharge. The cascade effect created by the human plasma burst was being interpreted by alien sensors as evidence of some form of exotic matter. Manipulation technology. Commander Steve Baker aboard the USS Phoenix watched the alien fleet's reaction to the warning shot with professional interest. As a veteran of numerous fleet actions, he could recognize panic when he saw it, even in alien vessels. The massive ships were beginning to fall back into defensive formations, and their energy signatures suggested they were preparing for full defensive activation. "Captain Morrison, this is Baker," Steve announced over the communication channel. "I think we just scared them more than we intended. Their ships are showing all the signs of a fleet preparing for a desperate defensive action." Dr. Alex Morgan, the fleet's lead physicist aboard the USS Horizon, was monitoring the energy exchanges between the two fleets with growing fascination. His instruments were detecting fluctuations in the alien ship's defensive systems that suggested a critical vulnerability in their otherwise impressive technology. "Captain Turner, I'm detecting some interesting patterns in their shield harmonics," Alex reported to his commanding officer. "It appears their defensive systems require several minutes to recalibrate after each activation cycle. During those recharge periods, they would be vulnerable to coordinated attacks." The information was immediately shared across the human fleet, though none of the captains had any intention of actually attacking the alien vessels. However, the tactical intelligence gave them confidence that they weren't as outmatched as they had initially believed. Captain Julie Adams, commanding the supply vessel USS Meridian, made an unexpected contribution to the developing situation. Her ship's industrial fabricators, designed for manufacturing replacement parts and equipment, were powerful enough to create large-scale holographic displays that could be seen across interplanetary distances. "All ships, this is Adams," Julie announced. "I'm going to try something that might help establish peaceful communication. My fabricators can create a massive visual display that should be visible to their sensors." The USS Meridian began projecting enormous holographic images into space, showing mathematical sequences, peaceful symbols, and basic representations of human civilization. However, the power requirements for such a display registered on alien sensors as yet another impossible energy signature from vessels that continued to defy their understanding of physics. Admiral Kethver watched in growing horror as the human supply vessel demonstrated what appeared to be matter manipulation technology. On a scale that exceeded anything in the Zephyrian arsenal, the holographic display required energy output levels that should have been impossible for a ship of that size. Yet the humans were accomplishing it with apparent ease. The alien fleet was now convinced beyond doubt that they were facing a technologically superior civilization that was simply playing with them, demonstrating capabilities that made Zephyrian technology look primitive by comparison. The alien fleet began to retreat in what appeared to be an organized withdrawal, but their movements were still following the same predictable patterns that had marked all their previous maneuvers. Admiral Keffer stood at his command station, his pale blue skin showing signs of stress as he watched the tactical display that showed human vessels maintaining their unpredictable movement patterns even as his own ships fell back. Commander Steve Baker aboard the USS Phoenix realized that this might be their only opportunity to establish meaningful communication with the alien fleet before they disappeared back into deep space. His years of experience in diplomatic missions had taught him that timing was crucial in first contact situations, and this retreat could easily turn into a permanent separation between the two civilizations. "Captain Morrison, this is Baker," Steve announced over the fleet communication channel. "I'm going to attempt a pursuit course, but I'll keep it non-threatening. Maybe I can demonstrate that we're trying to communicate rather than attack." Jake Morrison considered the risks of such an action. Pursuing a retreating fleet could be interpreted as an aggressive move, but if Commander Baker could somehow show peaceful intentions through his ship's movements, it might be their best chance to prevent a complete breakdown in relations. "Approved, Commander Baker, but keep your weapons powered down and try to make your intentions as clear as possible." The USS Phoenix began following the alien retreat, but Steve ordered his helmsman to execute a flight pattern that was designed to show intelligence and curiosity rather than hostility. The ship approached the alien formation at an angle, maintaining a respectful distance while broadcasting mathematical sequences and peaceful imagery on all frequencies. Dr. Alex Morgan, working frantically in his laboratory aboard the USS Horizon, made a breakthrough that would prove crucial to understanding their opponents. His detailed analysis of the alien energy signatures had revealed a critical flaw in their otherwise impressive defensive technology. Captain Turner, I've discovered something important about their shield systems, Alex reported to his commanding officer with obvious excitement in his voice. Their defensive fields are incredibly powerful, but they have a fatal weakness. Each time they activate their shields, the system requires a complete recalibration cycle that takes approximately 4 minutes to complete. Turner immediately grasped the tactical implications of this discovery. Doctor, are you saying that during those 4-minute periods, their defenses are completely down? Not completely down, but significantly weakened, Alex explained. Their shield generators have to reset their harmonic frequencies after each activation, and during that time they're vulnerable to coordinated attacks from multiple directions. This information was quickly shared across the human fleet, though none of the captains had any intention of using it aggressively. However, the knowledge that they had identified a weakness in alien defenses gave the human crews confidence that they weren't facing an invincible opponent. Meanwhile, Sub-Commander Valethus was reporting yet another impossible development to Admiral Keffer. Their sensors were detecting energy patterns from the pursuing human vessel that suggested it was somehow scanning their ship's internal systems without using any recognizable scanning technology. Admiral, the pursuing human vessel appears to be conducting detailed scans of our defensive systems, Valethus reported, his voice filled with anxiety. However, our sensors cannot detect any scanning beams or energy emissions that would explain how they are gathering this information. What the aliens didn't realize was that Dr. Morgan's analysis was based entirely on passive observation of their energy emissions. The human physicist was simply studying the natural radiation patterns from alien ships and drawing conclusions based on standard physics principles. But to the aliens this appeared to be evidence of scanning technology beyond their understanding. Captain Julie Adams aboard the USS Meridian decided to expand her holographic communication attempts, using her ship's industrial fabricators to create an even more elaborate display. The massive hologram now showed detailed mathematical proofs, representations of atomic structures, and peaceful imagery from human civilization. The power requirements for this expanded display pushed the Meridian's fusion reactors to their operational limits, creating energy signatures that appeared on alien sensors as matter manipulation on an unprecedented scale. To the Zephyrians, it looked as though the humans were casually restructuring space-time to create their holographic messages. Admiral, the human supply vessel is now demonstrating what appears to be localized space-time manipulation, reported Science Officer Telandra, her voice barely concealing her terror. The energy patterns suggest they are creating stable matter-energy conversions that exceed our theoretical maximums by several orders of magnitude. Admiral Keffer felt his understanding of the tactical situation crumbling around him. These human vessels, which had initially appeared primitive and harmless, were demonstrating capabilities that challenged every assumption about physics and technology that the Zephyrian Confederation had developed over centuries of scientific advancement. Chief Tactical Officer Greg Palmer aboard the USS Thunder had an idea that would inadvertently create the most terrifying display yet witnessed by the alien fleet. He suggested to his captain that they synchronize the shield harmonics of all human vessels to create a coordinated, defensive network that might be more effective against the aliens' advanced weapons. Captain Hayes, if we can synchronize our defensive systems, we might be able to create overlapping shield patterns that could protect the entire fleet, Greg suggested. It's never been tried before, but the theory is sound. Commander Ryan Hayes approved the experiment, and within minutes, all 6 human vessels began synchronizing their shield generators. The process required careful coordination and precise timing, but the human crews managed to achieve a level of harmonic resonance that created an energy field encompassing the entire fleet. To alien sensors, this coordinated shielding appeared as a single massive energy signature that suggested the human ships were somehow merging their defensive capabilities into one impossibly powerful system. The energy readings showed patterns that the Zephyrian computers couldn't classify or understand. Admiral, The human vessels have just demonstrated the ability to merge their defensive systems into a single coordinated network. Sub-Commander Valethus reported, his voice now showing signs of panic. The energy output of this combined system exceeds anything in our database by factors that our computers cannot calculate. The synchronized shields created harmonic resonances that interfered with alien sensor systems across multiple frequencies, making it appear as though the humans had developed some form of multidimensional defensive technology. Zephyrian. Fleet's instruments were registering impossible readings that suggested the human ships existed partially outside normal spacetime. Admiral Kethver realized that his fleet was facing a complete military disaster. Not only had they encountered a species with technology far beyond their own capabilities, but they had done so while in a first contact situation that could determine the future relationship between their civilizations. Communications officer Zalthek made one final attempt to establish contact with the human fleet, broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously and using every diplomatic protocol in the Zephyrian database. The message was simple but desperate, essentially a plea for the humans to identify themselves and explain their intentions. Ensign Tony Blake aboard the USS Valiant detected the alien broadcast and immediately began working to decode its meaning. The transmission was complex and layered, but certain mathematical elements suggested it might be an attempt at peaceful communication. Captain Morrison, I'm receiving what appears to be a structured communication attempt from the alien fleet, Tony reported. It's incredibly complex, but I think they're trying to establish a dialogue. Jake Morrison felt a surge of hope that the situation might still be resolved peacefully. Can you respond to them, Ensign? I'm trying, sir, but their communication protocols are unlike anything we've encountered. It may take some time to establish a working translation matrix. The alien fleet continued its retreat, but their movements showed increasing signs of disorder as their commanders struggled to understand what they were facing. The perfect formations they had maintained earlier were beginning to break down as individual ship captains began making their own decisions about how to respond to the impossible human capabilities they were witnessing. The stage was now set for a final confrontation that would determine whether first contact between humans and the Zephyrian Confederation would result in peaceful communication or a tragic misunderstanding that could lead to interstellar war between two civilizations that had no desire to fight each other. Captain Jake Morrison watched the retreating alien fleet on his main view screen and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. The massive alien ships were clearly in full retreat, their formations breaking apart as individual. Commanders seemed to be making their own decisions about how to escape from what they perceived as a superior enemy force. All ships, this is Morrison, Jake announced over the fleet communication channel. I want every vessel to power down all weapons and shields simultaneously. We need to show these aliens that we're not here to fight them. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her tactical station with concern written across her face. Captain, if we drop our defenses now and they decide to attack, we'll be completely vulnerable. Jake nodded, understanding the risk he was taking with the lives of everyone in the fleet. I know, Amy, but someone has to take the first step toward peace. If we keep escalating this situation, we're going to end up in a war that nobody wants. The order went out across all 6 human vessels, and within moments the energy signatures from the human fleet began dropping toward zero as fusion. Reactors powered down to minimum levels and defensive systems went offline. However, the sudden disappearance of all energy readings from the human ships created exactly the opposite effect that Jake had intended. Aboard the lead Zephyrian vessel, Sub-Commander Valethus stared at his sensor displays in absolute terror, as the human energy signatures simply vanished from his screens. To alien sensors, it appeared as though the human ships had somehow hidden their true capabilities behind false readings, and now they were revealing that they could mask their presence entirely. Admiral, the human vessels have just disappeared from our sensors, Valethus reported, his voice shaking with fear. They appear to have some form of cloaking technology that can completely hide their energy signatures from our most advanced detection systems. Admiral Keffer felt his last reserves of confidence drain away as he realized that the humans had been concealing their true technological capabilities throughout the entire encounter. Ships that could manipulate space-time, synchronize impossible defensive networks, and now completely disappear from sensors represented a level of advancement that made his own fleet look like primitive toys on the USS Valiant. Communications. Officer Ensign Tony Blake was working frantically to establish some form of translation protocol with the alien broadcasts. His computer systems had been analyzing the alien transmissions for the past hour, and he was finally beginning to see patterns that might represent a basic language structure. Captain Morrison, I think I'm making progress with their communication attempts, Tony announced with excitement. Their language appears to be based on mathematical relationships rather than phonetic sounds. If I can establish the basic numerical concepts, I might be able to create a working translation matrix. Dr. Helen Carter rushed to Tony's station from her xenobiology laboratory, carrying data pads filled with analysis of the alien transmissions. Her expertise in interspecies communication had taught her to look for universal concepts that could bridge the gap between completely different civilizations. Ensign Blake tried broadcasting the first 10 prime numbers followed by the Fibonacci sequence, Helen suggested. If they're as mathematically advanced as their technology suggests, they should recognize those patterns immediately. Tony began transmitting the mathematical sequences on the same frequencies the aliens had been using, and within minutes they received a response that made both of them smile with relief. The alien reply contained the same mathematical sequences, but extended beyond what the humans had sent, proving that they understood the concepts and were trying to establish a dialogue. Meanwhile, Admiral Keffer was facing what might be the most important decision of his career. His fleet was clearly outmatched by human technology, but the mathematical transmissions suggested that the humans were attempting peaceful communication rather than preparing for an attack. Sub-Commander Valethus, order all ships to stand down from combat readiness, Keffer commanded, though his voice still carried uncertainty. If these humans wanted to destroy us, they clearly have the capability to do so. Our only option is to attempt diplomatic contact and hope they are as interested in peace as their mathematical messages suggest. Communications Officer Zolthek worked to establish a basic translation protocol using the mathematical foundation that both sides had agreed upon. The process was slow and frustrating, but gradually she began to understand that the humans were trying to explain their technology in terms that the Zephyrians could comprehend. Dr. Helen Carter led the first successful exchange of actual information between the two fleets, carefully explaining human fusion technology and defensive systems in mathematical terms that the aliens could understand. The revelation that human vessels achieved their energy efficiency through compact fusion reactions rather than exotic matter manipulation came as a shock to the Zephyrian scientists. Admiral, the humans have just provided technical specifications for their power systems, Communications Officer Zolthek reported with amazement. Their technology is not based on space-time manipulation as we believed. They are using highly efficient fusion reactions that achieve energy densities we previously thought impossible. Admiral Keffer studied the translated information with growing understanding and embarrassment. The humans had not been demonstrating superior technology so much as they had been using familiar physics principles in ways that the Zephyrian computers couldn't analyze or predict. Captain Jake Morrison received the first successful translation of alien communications and learned that the massive fleet had interpreted every human action as evidence of hostile intent and superior technology. The aliens had been convinced that human ships were using advanced cloaking systems, matter manipulation, technology, and multidimensional defensive networks. Dr. Carter, are you telling me that they thought we were some kind of super-advanced civilization? Jake asked with disbelief. Helen nodded, trying to suppress a smile at the absurdity of the situation. Captain, their computer systems are so sophisticated that they couldn't recognize our relatively simple technology. They've been interpreting our fusion reactors as exotic matter converters and our communication attempts as electronic warfare attacks. The exchange of information continued for several hours as both sides worked to understand how such massive misunderstandings could have occurred. The aliens explained that their technology relied heavily on predictable computational analysis, while humans operated through adaptive thinking and creative problem-solving that couldn't be calculated by any known algorithms. Admiral Kethver faced the humbling realization that his technologically superior civilization had been completely outmaneuvered not by advanced alien science, but by tactical flexibility and the human ability to think outside established patterns. The Zephyrian reliance on computer-assisted decision-making had become their greatest weakness when facing an opponent who refused to follow logical behavioral models. The final phase of first contact involved both fleets working together to establish permanent communication protocols and peaceful diplomatic relations. However, the story of the encounter began spreading throughout the galactic community almost immediately, as other alien civilizations learned about the terrifying human vessels that had baffled Zephyrian technology and forced their retreat through sheer unpredictability. Word spread across the galaxy about human ships that could coordinate impossible energy networks, manipulate matter and spacetime, and demonstrate technology that even advanced civilizations couldn't understand or counter. The truth about human capabilities became irrelevant as the story grew in the telling, and humanity's reputation as a force to be approached with extreme caution spread throughout the galactic community. Captain Jake Morrison's final log entry noted that the greatest victories sometimes come not from superior firepower or advanced technology, but from being so fundamentally different from your opponents that they cannot predict or understand your actions. The human fleet returned home having accidentally established humanity's place in the galactic community as a species that other civilizations would approach with respect, caution, and a healthy fear of the unpredictable nature of human tactical thinking. The encounter had proven that sometimes the most effective weapon in first contact situations is not advanced technology, but the simple human ability to think creatively and adapt to unexpected circumstances in ways that confuse and intimidate even the most sophisticated alien minds.